Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Today, we are making another quick build. We'll be exploring a briefly summarized build for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And as always, if there's any D&D builds that you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. For our concept for today's video, we're going to be trying to recreate a class from 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. The class wasn't a base class from 4th edition, but was rather introduced in Divine Power, a supplemental player's book. The class that we're trying to recreate today is specifically the Avenger. But first of all, 4th edition and 5th edition are very different from a mechanical standpoint, so we won't be able to recreate this class in its entirety, but we will try to capture the essence of what the Avenger was. And what the Avenger was a lightly armored, if not no armor, damage dealer. They were a divine striker class, meaning that they had access to divine magic, or at least divine abilities, but they weren't a paladin per se. They were meant to wade into combat with nothing more than their faith and the biggest weapon that they could find. They didn't have any features like Rage or Smite that we would normally typically see from a 5th edition character, but they were still a very good striker in their own right. Their main features were their Armor of Faith, which does actually sound a little bit like Shield of Faith, to be honest, though in 4th edition this was more like the Monk or Barbarian's Unarmored Defense. They also had an Avenger's Censure, which is an ability that has since not been recreated in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, at least as far as I can tell. But that's because that Avenger's Censure worked off of a different Avenger feature called Oath of Enmity. Oath of Enmity was a feature for this class that has since been remade into Vow of Enmity for the Vengeance Paladin. In addition to Oath of Enmity, the Avenger also got Channel Divinity, and of course the other various powers from 4th edition. We're going to try and pick up things that can mimic their Armor of Faith, their Channel Divinity, their Oath of Enmity if possible, and also we're going to try and follow, to at least an extent, the key abilities that the Avenger worked around, which was Wisdom, Dexterity, and Intelligence. For us, we're going to try to recreate this Avenger concept by just being a warrior that uses light or no armor and wields the biggest weapon possible. Starting in character creation, we are pretty much anything. For the purpose of a free feat, I'm going to say that we're going to be a custom lineage, since then we can also flavor ourselves to be pretty much anything along those lines. However, we do ideally want this build to work reasonably well with any lineage. For custom lineage, we can choose between Dark Vision and a skill. I'll say Dark Vision because we don't necessarily need a skill, but that's fine. And then we gain a +2 to 1 ability score of our choice. And with our feat, I'm going to pick up a half feat in order to gain another +1 to a different ability score. For our free feat, we're going to take one from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and that is the Gift of the Gem Dragon. Now, I'm not actually going to flavor this as a dragon-specific feat. I would rather flavor this as more of a faith-based feat. However, for what it's worth, what the feat does is we can increase either our Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma score by 1 to a maximum of 20, and then we also get Telekinetic Reprisal. And that says that when a creature within 10 feet of us damages us, we can use our reaction to cause them to make a strength save, and on a fail, they take 2d8 force damage and are pushed away 10 feet away from us, but on a success, they take half as much and aren't pushed. We can also use this reaction a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, and we regain all expended uses when we finish a long rest. I will say that because this build kind of has 2 routes that we're going to be talking about, the other option would be to take a half feat that instead increases strength. I'll get to that in a second, but just keep that in mind as another option if you didn't want to increase your wisdom. So for our stats, what we are going to want is to put the +2 that we got from custom lineage into charisma, and then that +1 from our half feat into wisdom for us, or technically into strength like I mentioned. After point buy, we're going to want the following ability scores: 14 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intelligence, and 16 charisma. We're then going to have a 13 left over, which with the +1 becomes 14, and we can put that into either wisdom, like we're going to do, or into strength. For our background, I'm going to say pick your favorite, but we do probably want something that has a religious bend to it. However, you could flavor any background to have ties to any religion or deity, so within reason, pick whatever you want. Starting with the actual level breakdown of the build, we're going to look at levels 1 to 5 first. Now, we're not going to be a barbarian, and the reason for that is because A, we want to actually concentrate on some spells, and B, the 4E Avenger couldn't rage, so we're going to have to pick up our armor, or lack thereof, rather, somewhere else. We can't just rely on unarmored defense. So starting with 1 to 5, we're going to do something a little out of pocket, and we're going to start as a warlock. Thematically, that doesn't really make sense since the warlock isn't necessarily divine. However, we're picking the Pact of the Hexblade. And I would say that we should be able to theme this pact specifically as divine in nature. We could make a pact with a weapon that our deity has assigned for us, or created for us, or that we've found that is important to the deity in some way. We want Hexblade not just because of Hexblade's curse, though that is a nice little damage buff, but rather for Hex Warrior. Hex Warrior is going to let us use our charisma for any melee attack that we make, as long as the weapon we're using isn't heavy. At least not yet. Eventually we'll pick up Pact of the Blade, and that will allow us to bond with a specific weapon. It doesn't matter what traits or type that weapon has, it benefits from Hex Warrior. This will allow us to get a heavy two-handed weapon to then use our charisma with instead of actually having to use our strength score for. I'm going to say it's a great sword because that's what I really picture with this character, but you could honestly make it whateve you want, whether that's a polearm, a maul, or just a big great axe. So, now that we have Hex Warrior, and we know we're going to get Pact of the Blade at level 3, what else are we getting from Warlock 1 to 5? Well, level 2 we get Invocations, and one of the invocations we for sure want is going to be Armor of Shadows. I'm going to flavor this as our Armor of Faith, because it lets us cast Mage Armor on ourselves at will. That takes care of our defense. It does make our AC better when we're not wearing armor, which you could wear medium armor or light armor if you wanted to, but I like the idea of us to be able to use our invocation as an Armor of Faith that provides our defense for us. At Warlock 4, we're also going to get to pick up an ability score improvement / feat, and for that I will say just increase your charisma by +2 to put it to 18. That way we'll scale really well for anything that has to do with charisma, which includes our attacks. And then at level 5, we'll gain a third invocation, and for that we definitely want Thirsting Blade in order to be able to attack twice on a turn. Both the 4th and 5th level aren't necessary per se, and I'll talk about that in a second when we're looking at levels 6 and above. But for us, we wanted to go 4 and 5 into Warlock because it helps with our scaling in terms of creating this character right from level 1. Now looking at levels 6 and higher, we know that our first 5 levels in Warlock, where do we go from here? Well, there's 2 options really. Option 1 is really straightforward. We would just start going up into Paladin. And if you were starting at a higher level, this would probably be the way to go. We'd be able to just have extra attack, the ability score improvement, and maybe even aura of protection, depending on what level we're starting at. We'd of course still want Warlock to be able to get Hex Warrior and Pact of the Blade to use our charisma as our main attack stat, but Paladin offers a lot of other features that would be very beneficial and scale really well with our charisma, like of course aura of protection. Doing that also would give us Channel Divinity and Vow of Enmity, assuming we'd pick Vengeance Paladin. With all that said, it's not an ideal path for us since we already invested 5 levels into Warlock. Option 2, however, which is what I'm going for with this build, especially since we made our Wisdom the 14, we're going to go with War Cleric. And at level 1, that means some bonus proficiencies, which we don't really care about. That means extra spells and spell slots. And then we also get the War Priest ability. And the War Priest ability is essentially a number of charges equal to our Wisdom modifier, which is just 2 for now. But after we make an attack with a weapon, we can use a bonus action to expend a charge and make another attack with that same weapon on our turn. That means that as of level 6, we could have on some turns 3 attacks in any given turn. Now it wouldn't be until level 7 or Cleric 2 that we'd actually get our Channel Divinity, and our Channel Divinity would not provide us with Vow of Enmity, which is a little unfortunate. So if you want Vow of Enmity specifically, which, like I said originally, the Oath of Enmity from the 4th edition Avenger is essentially Vow of Enmity from the 5th edition Paladin. That would be fine for you to go Paladin and do that, but for us, we could count something else as our Oath of Enmity. And we'd actually count the Hex spell from Warlock, which we technically could have picked up, and I probably should have mentioned that we do want to pick up. Hex, or even our Hexblade's Curse, because we could also count that as our Oath of Enmity, both provide damage bonuses to single targets, and that is all what the Avenger is about. Going this route makes us a very strong attack-based damage dealer. We don't have smites yet, but we do make a lot of attacks, and with Hex, or Hexblade's Curse, or technically even both, we get a lot of extra damage on top of each of those attacks. Assuming we use Hex on our first turn, and then our second turn we use a War Priest charge, we would do 29 points of damage on average for the first round, and then 44 points of damage on average for the second round once we make 3 of our attacks. And of course, at level 7, if we're targeting an enemy that we really want to just take out of the combat, and we're not sure if we're actually going to be able to hit every single time, we have Guided Strike, our Channel Divinity, to ensure that we get at least that one crucial hit in on the enemy. The reason I prefer this path for our Avenger character, it's a little bit more unique than just using a Lockadin. The Warlock Paladin, or Lockadin, synergizes very well, and like I said, it's very good if we can start a little later on. However, for us, we're going to gain more spell slots overall, and it's better for the scaling from level 1, given that we got extra attack quicker and our first ability score improvement quicker, and then we can just bounce back and forth between the two classes, picking up any nice features that we'll get from either one of them. So what are those nice features? Well, assuming we go with a 12 Warlock and 8 Cleric split in our Cleric build, we can pick up features like, of course, War Priest and Channel Divinity and Guided Strike like I had talked about. But we're also going to gain extra spell slots. We'll have up to 4th level Cleric spell slots, and then we'll have 3 5th level spell slots from Warlock, which is really nice because that makes us feel like a bit more of a powerful half-caster rather than what we would get from just Paladin. We'd also gain a couple ability score improvements from going War Cleric, and that would allow us to increase our Wisdom twice up to a total of 18, so we just have more War Priest charges. And going Warlock 12 gives us the Life Drinker invocation eventually, which will allow us to add our Charisma modifier onto the damage of our Pact of the Blade weapon attacks when we use that, which we always want to do that. And that's really awesome because that'll just let us use our Charisma twice on the same attack. We could also pick up Eldritch Smite eventually as an invocation if we really want to. You don't have to, but we do have a lot of spell slots, and Eldritch Smite is just a really good Smite option. So I'll leave it up to you if you wanted to or not. Again, the Avenger never had Smite, but that doesn't mean that we have to pass it up. We'd also gain 3 more ability score improvements / feats. We could cap our Wisdom and our Charisma, we could increase our Dexterity to make our AC a bit better, and we could also pick up, if we wanted to, Great Weapon Master with one of those ability score improvements or feat. And we'd also get a Mystic Arcanum. The Mystic Arcanums that we have to choose from doesn't synergize too well with our build, but for what it's worth, we would gain a powerful 6th level spell that we could use once per day. Other than that, let's look at what we have. We are pretty much the 4E Avenger as this Cleric build. We don't have absolutely every feature that they do, but we're pretty close. We didn't get Vow of Enmity exactly, but instead we can count Hex or Hexblade's Curse as it. And if you were really set on getting Vow of Enmity specifically, because you want to try and get as close to a 1-to-1 recreation as possible, we could technically go 3 levels in Paladin. It just means that we'd be sacrificing Life Drinker and Mystic Arcanum from going up to Warlock 12. For what it's worth, though, I think that our path works perfectly fine. Ideally, by the end of our build, we would have an 18 in Dexterity from improving that twice. We'd have an 18 Wisdom, which isn't perfectly capped, but it's still good enough and gives us 4 War Cleric charges. And we'd have 18 Charisma. Again, not capped, so our attacks and our Charisma modifier that gets added to our damage isn't going to be as good as it could be, but it's still decent enough that we're fine with it. Plus, in terms of the rest of our mechanics, our Hex or other damage buff spells / features like Life Drinker, Hexblade's Curse, even Divine Favor if we wanted to use that, scale very well with extra attacks, and we can make 3 a turn as long as we have some War Priest features handy. That gives us very good, consistent damage. At max level, we should be able to dish out about 46 damage on turn 1 on average, assuming we use our bonus action to bamf up Hex, followed by 66 damage on turn 2 plus, as long as we have War Priest charges. That also isn't accounting for Eldritch Smite or Hexblade's Curse. We are the deity's sword, meant to strike down their foes, not necessarily uphold their values. That's why I don't think we really need to be a paladin, and that this actually works pretty well so long as we flavor our warlock to be more faith-based rather than pack-based. Honestly, I think that this is a pretty cool recreation of the 4E Avenger, but let me know what you think of the build or what you might change to make it better. Thank you so much for joining me on the journey, and I hope to see you in the next one.